Hello, everyone. This is Jose here with Nick coming back to you from Moneyline MMA. We're here with another great week of UFC fights. And we got UFC 274 this week, Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje, and we have Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza. This is something in for the works. Also, we got Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson on deck. We got OSP versus Shogun Rua, and we also, who can forget the Legends fights, Joe Lauzon versus Cowboy Donald Cerrone. All right, let's get started with the first fight of the main card, and that is Donald Cerrone versus Joe Lauzon. And this is a fight that surprised me because this isn't a fight that does much for anyone other than just the fans in terms of it's two legends fighting.
Right. Old school people that, yeah.
Exactly. This is like Matt Hughes versus BJ Penn. This is just something for fun. I think in
Yeah,
this case,
honestly.
both are in similar positions of their career. Would you agree, Nick? They're both coming off losses. They're both nowhere near title. They're nowhere near title contention.
100%.
And this one is pretty much. I think this may almost be a goodbye fight for at least one of them for sure. Not sure which one, but I can guarantee that at least one of these guys, it will most likely be their final fight.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly has no implications on any belt for this class. I mean, I was interested that it was in lightweight actually. Cowboy's kind of, he's a guy who's been up and down a lot of weight classes. He's fought the who's who of the UFC, but this one's actually at lightweight, so that one interested me. But regardless, I don't think it has any implications on the belt. It's definitely more of a fight for the ages.
I was genuinely surprised to see Joe Lauzon be the underdog, but not by much. Um, Donald Cerrone, the last time we saw him, he lost to Alex Moreno, and that was via TKO in the first round. Uh, and then before that, he was already on a four-fight losing streak, and he lost to Conor McGregor. The last time he won was against Ali Aquenta, and Joe Lauzon, though he looked phenomenal his last fight when he got a TKO in the first round himself to Jonathan Pierce. Um, he was on a three-fight losing streak prior to that. Got some wins and losses, but nothing too huge. He's a guy that was he was the dog coming in early on in his career. I mean, who can forget when he KO'd James Pulver in the first round back at UFC 63? He shocked the world. This was a no one who just came in and was fighting a top dog, and everyone thought that they were feeding this guy to the wolves. And holy cow, did this man show the world who he is? And he's went on to have a pretty subpar UFC career. Not really ever reached the title, but nor did Donald Cerrone. And I think they both remind me so much of each other. But I don't know about you, Nick, but like I personally have Joe Lauzon winning this. I think his grappling is better overall. Donald Cerrone has great grappling, but I truly believe Lauzon is going to try to take this to the ground and try to challenge Donald Cerrone's grappling.
Sure, he is one of the old school guys. Like back in the first days of the UFC, what was it, like 2006, where he would just go for people's legs. Like that was kind of a unprecedented thing for people to just go and attack the legs, get to the ground, and be good at that one thing. And he really thrived doing that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he continued to try doing that against Cowboy. I think Cowboy has a good ground game, but I just don't know. Obviously, I don't know if it's as good as Joe's, but what Cowboy lacks maybe in some of the grappling game, he definitely, to me, at least makes up in the striking game. Uh, we can look at it here. Cowboy's volume, he's landing 4.43 strikes per minute to Joe's 2.84. It's clear that Cowboy, to me, with some of these statistics I'm seeing, has a standing advantage on the feet. I'm just not convinced that Joe's going to be able to get Cowboy to the ground if he really wants to be. Cowboy's got a 74% takedown defense, and to me, that's a big deal. I think if he really wants to, he can keep this fight on the feet. And in that case, to me, he has the advantage here. The fight odds right now minus 178 in Cowboys' favor, leaving Joe at a plus 144. So yeah, Joe is the underdog, and I think this is about where that money line should be. It's clearly showing that both fighters are getting some respect. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it opened where Cowboy was like minus 300 or something, and Joe had a bunch of money come in his way, and I think rightfully so, because he is a very good fighter, and I would be worried about him getting Cowboy on the ground and going for the legs in that submission. But as I see it right here, I'm actually in the other way, Jose. I think I'm going to be going Cowboy in this fight. Just because I think he can keep this feet on the standing if he would like to.
And that's a fair pick, Nick. Julie, this was a tough one for me to decide. Donald Cerrone, he has had a phenomenal UFC career, but the only thing that steered me away from him, like he, both him and Joe Lauzon are, have a lot of recent losses, but more so Donald Cerrone, like he's not been the same since. Dropping back down to 155. He was 155, went up to 170. Who's looking good there. Like we cannot forget what he did to Rick Story. You were just talking about earlier about his stand-up, game, and holy cow, like how can we forget that amazing combination he put on Rick Story at UFC 202, or if following up with that with a KO head kick to Matt Brown at UFC 206. He did get trouble with the bigger guys, but that's obviously not going to be a problem here against Joe Lauzon. Joe Lauzon is not much different in terms of height and reach. Right now, Joe Lauzon is 5'10", and Donald Cerrone is actually the bigger guy in this case, which is good for him. And he also has the higher reach advantage. I just think that his distance and his stand-up game is going to be a challenge for Joe Lauzon, but Joe Lauzon knows how to set up combinations to close that gap and take him down. So I do respect your pick, Nick, but I'm gonna, I personally would go Joe Lauzon winning this.
Fair. Yeah, I could totally see that. I mean, yeah, in the end, I agree. I respect your pick on that. I'm not so strong on Cowboy where I'm willing to make a bet with you right here, right now. Because in this case, I don't think I'm that confident. I was also interested to see when I was looking into this that they both run gyms, and that was interesting to me. They're both kind of older guys now that are just turning into being they're turning into the coaching side of their careers. So I don't think in either case, we're going to be seeing too much more of these guys in the octagon. In this sense, where they're potentially trying to fight to increase their standings. Um, but yeah, in any case, power to you there. I think this is going to be a really close fight, and as far as the finish, I could totally see it going to decision. So for the next fight on this card, we've got OSP Ovince Saint Preux against Mauricio Rua Shogun. Got a rematch coming up, Jose. This would be an interesting fight, I gotta tell you. This is a rematch, like I mentioned, is coming up from a few years ago when OSP came in and got a first round quick knockout on Shogun, and I think Shogun's definitely got some determination to come in here, prove himself against OSP, but he is looking as at some heavy odds against him right now. OSP is minus 250 on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Marcio Shogun Rua plus 198. So currently looking at the biggest favorite on the main card so far up to this point. So I don't know, Jose. What are you thinking towards this fight?
Yeah, so this fight kind of is surprised me that happened a bit. It's a rematch that I don't think a lot of people really saw coming. It almost seems like they're just trying to give fighters fights, just almost write out their contracts or something, kind of like the last fight with Donald Cerrone versus Joe Lauzon, when we just talked about. I think this is just a fight that's fun for the fans. I don't see these two guys making a title run anytime soon. I do think they're both probably nearing their end of their UFC careers. Maybe not their fighting careers, but definitely their UFC careers. And that's nothing but respect to them. I mean, Mauricio Rua, there is a lot of respect behind his name. This guy is a legend. He's done his thing over at Pride. He is an MMA Hall of Famer in general. And what surprises me is that OSP, there's only a one year difference, like in the age gap between them, and their records are pretty similar. Mauricio Rua is 27, 12 and 1, and OSP is 25, 16 and 16. Um, I just don't see this fight playing any other different way than kind of how it happened the first time. I can kind of see OSP winning via knockout because I just think compared to Mauricio Rua, he doesn't have the same fight IQ as him, but he definitely has the athleticism and strength to do what he's done before. And without a doubt, come in with that confidence of, hey, I knocked this guy out before, I think is going to be that type of thing that's is going to, not worry him one bit about his opponent. Because when a lot of people go against Mauricio Rua, they're going against a legend. They kind of get those goosebumps, like, yo, whoa, I'm in the UFC, like I'm fighting this guy. This guy I used to watch, and now he's in front of me. Um, OSP, he's like the opposite of that. He's almost like, I beat this guy before, this legend. Like nothing scares me. So that being said, I do lean for OSP. I do go with the favorite in this one, Nick. I just do think his power and strength is going to be enough to put lights out for Mauricio Rua.
Yeah, no, man. I'm looking at some of these fights here that OSP was fighting lately against Tanner Boser last year. He actually got fleeced in the second round. Jamal Hill fleeced in the second round. So OSP is kind of struggling. Granted, in the last 2 years, lost to Ben Rothwell in 2020. But like you mentioned, he's fought some of the highest end talent the UFC has. He took John Jones to a decision back in 2016. This guy's been one of the more consistent fighters around. So I don't mean to sit here and discount him. He's losing to some tough guys. Tanner Boser is not a pushover. And as I'm talking about opponents, we see Shogun Rua's last loss against Paul Craig 2 years ago in 2020. Look, he got outstruck by Paul Craig. To me, that's just embarrassing. Paul Craig is one of the best grapplers in the division, but to be outstruck and knocked out as the legend you are as Shogun at that point in your career is just disappointing to me. I'm just not seeing enough out of Shogun right now to make me think that he's going to be able to turn it around and change enough to be able to overcome Saint Preux's advantages in height and reach advantage. Saint Preux is 6'3". He's got an 80-inch reach. I mean, he's a big, long dude. Not that Mauricio Rua is small with the 76-inch reach. I just think that's a big disadvantage for the guy. And if he wants to take this to the ground, which he very well might. He's got 2.1 takedowns per 3 rounds in his UFC fights at this point. So, in my opinion, if he takes it to the ground, we're looking at OSP with a potential sub chance as well. I just think he has a sneaky strength on the ground that Shogun might not be ready for. So, to me, this is a little bit more of a lock than the Cowboy fight, in my opinion. This one, and the odds are showing it as well. So in terms of picking bets on this fight, I would definitely consider putting OSP on the parlay. It's a little bit more difficult to add him as a money line bet here at minus 250. You're just not making enough money in terms of win the way that you can win. I would say knockout would be probably the most likely for OSP. Kind of repeating what happened in their first matchup, but in the end, it could go to decision. Who knows? I think Shogun is at least going to be making this a little bit closer than it looks, and that's why I'm kind of warning against picking that money line. Because to me, in the end, it's going to look more like a minus 180 advantage, not quite a minus 250.
Yeah, and I'm a little surprised though too. Like I personally do go towards OSP like yourself, and putting him in a parlay is a smart idea. Maybe some viewers may think that's may question that though, because OSP is coming off two losses in this both in the second round, one to TKO and one to KO. And even that being said, even though that is the fact and that happened, I do think OSP is going to come back hungrier, and he's going to come back wanting to get that KO, or that submission. That being said, I like yourself. I'm down for OSP, and he's in my parlay. And all right, that brings us over to the next fight, which I believe, and Nick, I know you do too, that this is most likely going to be the people's main event. I think we have a potential fight of the year here, fight of the night. I think we're in for some fireworks for this one. We got Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. And right now, the money line's got Michael Chandler as the favorite with a minus 450 and Tony Ferguson at a plus 330.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is going to be a crazy fight, Jose. We've got Michael Chandler, who has been one of my favorites since he came back to the UFC, and fought Dan Hooker, which was just an awesome fight. I love both of those guys, to be honest. And he he comes back around after beating Dan Hooker to fight Charles Oliveira, the current champion. He made it a really tough fight, but ended up getting KO'd in that second round. So then he goes to fight Gaethje, and we both know that fight was wild. I personally had my money on Chandler. I thought he was going to get the best out of Gaethje. He did, and that's why he lost the fight, clearly. So in the end, Michael Chandler's coming back and fighting the best of the best in the UFC, which I think he deserves at this point. Tony Ferguson coming off a couple key losses against top talent. But the one thing that is interesting to me is that loss to Dariush last year, and to me, that's one of the little things you can look at to show as an example of Tony's potential decline. I'm a guy who loves watching Tony Ferguson fight. He puts his heart on the mat, and every time. It's one of the best shows on television when he fights. So he's a guy that I won't be missing, but I'm not quite sure. I don't know. This is a tough fight to pick, that's for sure.
Yeah, Tony Ferguson being the fan favorite, it's sad to see the way things have been going for him lately. Who can forget that unbelievable 12 fight win streak he had, and the four fights that unfortunately never happened with Khabib. That I truly believe Tony Ferguson was the guy to beat Khabib when he was in his prime. I don't know if Tony is in his prime anymore. I just I see Michael Chandler being the hungrier guy right now. They're both hungry, that's for sure. They're both coming off multiple tough losses. But I do think Michael Chandler is the hungrier guy, being that he's been in the UFC the shortest amount of time, and he's just overall, I think, a little more technical than Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson's really wild, and I just think that wildness of his is kind of now starting to catch up to him, where he's not as technical, and he has ventured off and reconnected with his old wrestling coach, and bring back some of his own fundamentals. But even then, I think Michael Chandler is the better wrestler. Tony Ferguson has great jujitsu, but it is tough seeing this fight for me as a fan. To be honest, I love them both. They're both two of my favorite fighters, and this is actually one of those fights where I would hate to see either of them lose, but it's got to happen. That's the fight game, and because of that, I see Michael Chandler coming in with heavy hands. I can see him being Mike Iron Chandler.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from there. Chandler is, interestingly enough, I took a look at some of the stats between these two guys because Ferguson is obviously the kind of guy who loves to fight on on the feet, and it was fascinating. You mentioned Chandler's wrestling ability. I think he has a wrestling background, and he hasn't really chosen to use it that much in his UFC fights. He totally just decided to duke it out with Gaethje, and he tried his best to duke it out with Oliveira as best he could, and to me that just shows his longevity. He's got a chin too. It is not easy to knock him out. Obviously, Tony Ferguson, in his own right, has one of the most ridiculous chins in the UFC. But specifically looking from a volume standpoint, they're really similar. Tony Ferguson putting a 5.15 significant strikes per minute, and Chandler in his or four fights in the UFC has matched with a 5.17. To me, that's pretty impressive to be able to put out the similar number of significant strikes, volume wise, as Tony Ferguson. Neither of these guys are really going to be looking to take it to the ground, but I do think if Michael Chandler gets hurt, if Michael Chandler's a little gassed, he does have that choice where he could try just taking down Ferguson. He might not try a sub attempt, just get a little bit of ground control, regain his breath a little bit, or if he's hurt, try and recover a little bit from whatever happened and get back into the advantage point of that fight. So to me, that could be a really interesting dynamic that I just don't think Tony Ferguson can rely on. One of the more interesting points too for me in this fight is that it's only 3 rounds. We've seen so many fights from Tony Ferguson, and it's almost synonymous at this point. When I think of Tony Ferguson, he's fighting a 5 round fight. In this case, that won't be obviously he had fought Dariush, and it was a similar case last year in 2021. Uh, This isn't a 5 round fight, and in that case, I think that might be against Tony Ferguson. He's the kind of guy who just gasses people out. He has the most solid chin in the division. You're not going to really knock this guy out, so you better be able to outlast him. But in 3 rounds, I think Chandler might be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Again, Tony Ferguson, he took brutal loss to Justin Gaethje back in 2020. And since then, he hasn't really been the same. He's been in those three round fights with Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush. But even in those two fights, he didn't look that good. He did not look like the same Tony that was the one that fought Kevin Lee, Rafael Dos Anjos, Edson Barboza. That Tony Ferguson was one of the best Tony Ferguson. Like that was the prime Tony Ferguson. And in these 3 rounds, I do see Michael Chandler piecing him up, breaking that the distance. He's short and stocky and strong, and like you said, he's going to be able to hold him down. People wondered how Tony Ferguson would look against Khabib on the ground. I think Michael Chandler's actually come forward and show that what it would have looked like. Like you mentioned, he doesn't use his wrestling as much anymore because he is one of those guys who was a wrestler and has fallen in love with their punching power. So now he always wants to just stay on the feet and try to put people out. Literally, this is how Justin Gaethje fights too. That's why those two had a phenomenal fight, and we'll talk more obviously about Justin Gaethje later down the road. But that being said, it is a tough one because if this is a loss for El Kukui, this would be his fourth loss in the UFC, and many people know that, you're even lucky enough to get a fourth shot. So that being said, Michael Chandler's not that far off either. If he gets this loss, I truly believe that Michael Chandler does have the potential to become a UFC champion someday. And that being said, I do see Michael Chandler winning this. If he doesn't put him out, I do see it by decision. I do see Michael Chandler winning this one.
Yeah, that's a great point you make there, Jose. I was going to wrap up with my side of the betting thoughts, and without a doubt, Chandler is the pick. But at minus 430, I'm really not leaning towards that money line pick. If anything, I'm going to favor a decision, Mike Chandler, excuse me, because as we've explained, Tony Ferguson is just not going to get knocked out. He's not. He's been submitted, but I will never forget when this man was submitted and his bone was just like his arm. I've never seen an elbow bent that far before the guy tapped. It was just insane. I don't think that's going to be the ending for this fight. To me, it goes to decision for Michael Chandler, and that would be my final pick. And for the first of two title fights on UFC 274, we've got Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza. Jose, I can't tell you how excited I am for this fight. Rose is a minus 210 favorite against Carla, the Cookie Monster, plus 168. Honestly, this is a really interesting fight, being the co-main event here. This is a rematch. Most people are well aware that Carla was able to eat up Rose in the third round of their first fight a few years ago and win their bout. But this is a rematch. Many fights in between for both of these fighters, and I'm really curious to see how it plays out.
Yeah, Nick, the Rose has sure grown a lot since their last matchup to Carla Esparza. Um, Rose, she has a lot of wins in rematches, but granted, she's always won the first fight, the initial fight too. This is actually the first rematch she has in her career where she lost the first time, but she's grown since then, and she's proven to be a phenomenal champion. She's 2-2 for a lot of. She's 2-0 against a lot of her opponents. She's gone against Tisha Torres twice, Weili Zhang, and Jessica Andrade, as well as Joanna Jacek. And this being her second rematch, she has she must feel like she has a chip over her shoulder, being that this is the one girl that beat her, and especially the first time she had the opportunity to get UFC gold back when she was coming off the Ultimate Fighter. So I do expect to see Rose to be a lot different than what she was the first time she fought Carla Esparza.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jose. I do want to mention, I'm pretty sure. Rose lost her first fight against Jessica Andrade, right when she got slammed on her head. So I don't necessarily think it's the first time she lost the first of two bouts, but it is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Just because, like you mentioned, I think that's a great point about how much she's grown. What was interesting to me is I'm looking past she after fighting Carla Esparza. Rose fought Angela Hill, Paige Van Zandt, and Tisha Torres. She got two straight rear naked chokes on Angela Hill and Paige Van Zandt, and it seemed like she was on a vengeance after being choked out by Carla Esparza. It just to me it was showing that she was taking big steps to improve some of the shortcomings in her game. Obviously, she wasn't able to submit Tisha Torres. That went to decision. Tisha's the queen of decision fights, and obviously you mentioned having fight Joanna Jedrzejczyk twice, knocking her out in the first of those two bouts. I just think Rose has definitely proved that she's grown. I think a lot more than Carla in the last couple of years since their first fight. And Rose is still extremely young. I was kind of amazed to learn that she's 29 years old. She's got such a bright future ahead of her still, and I'm definitely curious to see how this plays out. But in my opinion, Rose will be able to kind of decide whether or not this stays on the feet or goes to the ground. I think Rose has definitely improved her ability to take down, defend herself, and I'll also be superior on the feet. She looks to have a 4.01 strikes landed per minute against Esparza's 2.34. So if Rose, successfully keeps this on the ground, this might be her advantage.
Yeah, and of course, Rose does have phenomenal stand-up game, but we cannot disregard Carla Esparza's phenomenal wrestling. She is a strong wrestler. In my opinion, she's one of the best female wrestlers out there in the UFC right now. She knows what she needs to do to get the win. They're not the most fun matches. She ground and pounds and tries to go for that decision. She is not much of a finisher herself, so I definitely believe that that's going to be Carla Esparza's game plan. I think she is going to try to wrestle Rose and take her to the ground. But again, you said it best. Rose has phenomenal stand up, and also her ground game is it can definitely compete with Carla Esparza. But Carla Esparza has been looking strong and sharp, and I'm not gonna lie, like. I was a little worried about this one for Rose. I was like, wow, this may be Rose's toughest challenge yet. Um, Weili Zhang, and Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, yes, she does have some losses to them, and yes, Joanna Jędrzejczyk is considered like at one point was considered like a female goat. Um, but Rose does have that knockout power, and I would not be surprised if she is able to clip Carla Esparza by finding the right opening at the right moment. I just truly believe that if this were to go Carla's way, she will try to push it all 5 rounds and just try to wrestle her on the ground. And I do believe Rose will be looking more for an opportunity to end it early.
Yeah, Jose, honestly, you almost read my mind there because I was thinking about, you make some great points about how great Carla is at wrestling and controlling that ground game. But the thing that I wanted to hammer home that you just mentioned is the fact that Carla does like to grind for those decisions. I was noticing that in her fights against Alexa Grasso and Marina Rodriguez, she's pushing 7, 8 minutes of ground control time in a 15-minute fight. And in both of those situations, she tried to combine one submission attempt. And that just goes to show that she's not necessarily getting to the ground and being too active and actively going for the head or going for the leg or the armbar. She's just going in there to control the fight and fight her way. And with that being said, I just don't necessarily think she's going to be able to take on Rose the same way and fight Rose the way she wants to fight Rose. I think at this point, Rose will be able to have a little bit more control and fight the way she wants. So in the end, I think I'm leaning Rose on this fight. I agree. It's a very tough call. I'm not sure how much I agree with the spread on this. Rose minus 210 is quite steep in terms of just straight up money line betting. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than that. If you're going to bet Rose, I'd be careful. In terms of the money line, I think she should win this fight, but shall it go to decision? There could be some questions there if Carla gets in takedowns and control time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we definitely know who's going to win this match if it's spent on the ground majority of the time. But, something that I think we should also keep in consideration is Rose's height, reach advantage. I mean, she's 5'5" compared to Carla Esparza as being 5'1", and Rose also has a 6'5" reach advantage, while Carla has a 6'3". So Carla's definitely gonna be avoiding those strikes from Rose and trying to find ways to close the distance and take her down. And that's the way Carla pretty much fights. She's like reminds me of the female Ben Askren or Damian Maya, where a lot of their striking is more specifically just to close the distance and take them down. They're not trying to kickbox you or just straight up box you on the feet. They just want to make it dirty, throw some punches, and create an opening to take you down because that's when they really get to work. So, yeah, so if this is spent majority on the ground, I definitely see Carla winning this if it makes it to decision. But I do believe Rose will use her height and reach advantage, as well as some motivation from their first encounter and as well as her experiences that she's had, all the many other great fights she's had since she fought Carla the first time. I think all that together is a perfect recipe for Rose to most likely get the win that night. So that being said, I agree with your pick, and I would lean towards Rose winning this uh, via either knockout or by the decision as well. But seeing how Rose has been lately, I don't know if this fight is gonna make it all 5 rounds.
Okay. Yeah, I like those picks, honestly. I'm trying to keep my bias out of it. Having being a big fan of Rose. I mean, she was born in Milwaukee. That's the hometown for me, and I love to see people from Milwaukee grow up and succeed in the big stages like this. But regardless, like you said, I really do think this is a fight that at this point in her career benefits Rose a little bit more than it benefits Carla. So my final pick would be Rose Namajunas in this one. If I had to pick, I would probably say by knockout. I would love to see Rose incorporate her kicks a little bit more. We all remember that fantastic knockout she got against Zhang Wei Li. I would love to see something like that happen again to Carla Esparza.
Yeah, Nick, I totally agree with that assessment of yours. I think Carla is definitely going to go for that double leg takedown because she has some of the best double leg takedowns in the game. And I can see Rose using her fight knowledge to step aside and try to land that head kick. I definitely see her trying to time it right. She's definitely going to go into that fight expecting Carla to take to the ground. So you best believe that Rose has been working on that takedown defense. And not only that, straight up counters. I definitely see Carla trying to shoot in for a double leg takedown, and I can straight up see Rose landing a knee or a kick to the head and calling it an early night. Again, and that's also me being a Wisconsin native like Rose and like yourself. I'm trying to leave the bias out of it, and all aside, I do think technically Rose is the better fighter. I think her combinations are a lot more crisp and sound, and she just has overall better reactive skills. Carla is more of a push forward. She will eat shots just to throw a harder one back at you, which can be pretty risky in this game as opposed to Rose. She has good feints. She has nice parries as well. And that being said, her kicks are phenomenal, and that's why I think that she's going to try to time something against Carla when she tries to take her down.
Totally agree.
And well, Nick, that brings us over to the main event, the fight that, besides the co-main event and Chandler versus Ferguson, this is the other fight everyone is extremely excited to see. Everyone's eager to see Charles Oliveira at minus 188 versus Justin Gaethje, who's a plus 152 underdog. This is going to be one in the making. Charles Oliveira is looking to be like the new 155 GOAT and even pound for pound GOAT. I mean, this man has been on an unbelievable win streak since 2018.
It's pretty insane, Jose. I tell you what, Charles Oliveira has been a monster himself, having won every single fight since Paul Felder back in 2017. He's gone through Clay Guida and multiple big names like Nick Lentz, Flash Gordon, Tony Ferguson, of course. That was a ridiculous fight where he completely bent Tony Ferguson's arm in angles I've never seen a human's arm get bent. And no tap was given, but Charles Oliveira wins by decision. Some crazy fights this man finds himself in. And I haven't even said a word about Gaethje yet. His name speaks for himself. He's one of the most popular fighters in the UFC at this point, having just knocked out some of the top competition, including Cowboy Cerrone and Tony Ferguson, something obviously Oliveira couldn't even do. And then his most recent win against Michael Chandler, which was just a duke out. That was an incredible fight to watch. Those guys just went in there and duked it out for 15 minutes and gave it their all. That was pretty incredible to see.
Right, yeah, Justin Gaethje, he has no, you can't question his heart. This guy loves to be in brawls. This guy came in with so much hype. He was undefeated when he came into the UFC, and then he got his first his introduction to the UFC was everything about Justin Gaethje. That war he had against Michael Johnson. That was one for the ages. And then he did end up coming some losses, and people were wondering, like, is this guy legit or real? But man, he's shown he's the real deal with his knockout power, getting two back to back, getting three back to back knockout punches and TKO in the first round. He knocked out James Vick, vicious KO. He knocked out Edson Barbosa, vicious KO, and he finished down Cerrone. All of these within the first round, and not to mention Tony Ferguson. He wasn't able to finish him, but Tony Ferguson is a different breed. Like, Tony Ferguson took a lot of punches that many other UFC fighters would have definitely fallen to. And then, not to mention, he also actually got the opportunity to fight for gold against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And there we shown he landed some tough punches against Khabib. But again, Khabib is a GOAT himself. Khabib was able to neutralize Justin Gaethje on the ground and take advantage and look for a submission win. And hey, you know who else has great submission skills? Charles Oliveira. And not to mention, I kind of want to look back and talk about a few of Justin Gaethje's losses, specifically the ones to Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier, because these came more on the feet. I think Charles Oliveira has better stand-up game than Justin Gaethje, and Justin Gaethje has, again, strong, phenomenal power, but I don't think he's as technical when it comes to some of the other guys in the division. Like, look at Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier is one of the most technical fighters at 155, and he was able to stay ahead of Justin Gaethje and outstrike him and pretty much put him out and beat him, without having to knock him out like that bad. Like, it went into the fourth round, and then the way he dropped him, it was just a slow buildup. It wasn't one of those quick one hitter quitters like Justin Gaethje. He takes a lot of punishment, but he doesn't take it for long. Just like Tony Ferguson, everyone at some point has a breaking point, and I do believe Justin Gaethje has a breaking point, and I do believe Charles Oliveira will find that breaking point, just like how he did with Michael Chandler, or he will sneak in a submission, just like Khabib.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening, Jose. Honestly, no doubt about Charles Oliveira having a superior ground game with that jujitsu background. But I would think it's worth mentioning Justin Gaethje's wrestling background. I really think Justin Gaethje might be able to have a much better chance at commanding where this fight is. I understand that Oliveira is one of the best submission artists in the UFC, and I think he without a doubt has the most submission wins in that division. But I just don't think he often fights against a guy like Justin Gaethje. And in this case, Gaethje's looking at a 73% takedown defense. He knows what he's doing on the ground. I do understand that he got subbed by the king himself, Khabib. But in that case, he still won on the feet before Khabib was able to take him down. And looking at it, I honestly have to disagree with the statement that Oliveira is better standing. Just looking at some stats, I'm seeing that Gaethje has over double the significant strikes landed per minute at 7.5 compared to Charles Oliveira's 3.4. Which alone isn't that significant. It just shows the volume that Gaethje can throw out. But what I'm also interested in is the fact that Justin Gaethje lands 60% of his strikes, which is an exceptionally high level, and he can still defend himself with 55% defense of percentage wise against the significant strikes that were attempted on him. Where Charles Oliveira is a 52%, which is modest, but I guess just strictly looking at the stand up part of this, I think Gaethje without a doubt has an advantage, and I think for sure he's going to be looking to kind of have a similar fight as to what was against Michael Chandler, another guy who's kind of known for his wrestling, and a lot of people thought he'd go in there and use it against Gaethje, but he didn't. Those guys duked it out, and pretty much there was almost no element to the ground game in that fight whatsoever. But when Chandler did get a takedown, he got one takedown on 6 attempts on Justin Gaethje. And the most interesting part of that is it led to 3 seconds of time control on the ground for Chandler. Justin Gaethje turned that around and got a minute 37 control on the ground before it went back to a stand-up game. So, in all honesty, I've got a lot of faith in Justin Gaethje's wrestling game and his ability to prevent Charles Oliveira from getting that submission.
That is a great, excellent point you have there about Justin Gaethje, Nick. He does have phenomenal wrestling. He had a great D1 college career, but unfortunately, he doesn't use that wrestling. He doesn't utilize it the way he probably should. He does use it a lot for defense. I mean, he does have zero takedown average, and so there. That being said, he doesn't have a takedown accuracy rate, and he has no really submission average as well. Unlike Charles Oliveira, Charles Oliveira has a 2.5 takedown average, as well as a 41% takedown accuracy, and 2.79 submission average. Um, Justin Gaethje, he is a wrestler, but he's one of those wrestlers that found out he has strong knockout power, and he's really gotten carried away with it. I do think he gets excited when he gets in brawls. I do think he loves to make things messy, and I do think he just wants to get that exciting knockout win. I do believe this guy's a human highlight reel. He always wants to have a fight of the night, fight of the year, and just he really wants to bring people to his level. He wants to make other fighters not technical, and he breaks them down differently, not just through his wrestling defense, but through his leg kicks. This guy has some of the best leg kicks in the UFC, and it's kind of weird because when you look at his stance and the way he fights and his structure, you don't really think this guy is going to be throwing a lot of kicks because he's kind of a stiff when he walks. He almost looks like a billboard when he walks. No offense, Justin Gaethje, but he doesn't throw these high leg kicks. He's not like Edson Barboza throwing spinning kicks or head kicks. He's looking more just to chop down your legs and shut it down, similar to how Dustin Poirier shut Conor McGregor down with those leg kicks, those calf kicks especially. Just kicking the calves, back of the leg right there, just 2 or 3 good hits. It slows someone down. And that could be the only thing I can see him doing against Charles Oliveira to prevent the takedowns is him chopping down the legs to the point where Charles won't even want to shoot for a takedown because his legs are going to be so wobbly underneath him and he's going to be in pain that he may not even want to return kicks himself. That being said, I do think Charles Oliveira knows and expects this from Justin Gaethje. And over the last few fights too, Justin Gaethje has not been throwing as high volume as fights as he's done initially before. It depends who he fights. He didn't throw that many against Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler didn't really get that much affected by them either. But other fights prior, everyone knows Justin Gaethje's leg kick game, and I, without a doubt, believe that he's going to try to bring that in. But I do think Charles Oliveira is going to use his height and reach advantage to kind of narrowly slip those away and then return some counter punches himself, just like how he did against Michael Chandler. We cannot forget not Justin Gaethje has heart, but so does Charles Oliveira. This guy was almost finished in the first round by Michael Chandler when they were fighting for UFC gold. Charles Oliveira has shown he has heart. He has submission skills. He has the stand-up game, and he has heart. And that's just one more thing over Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje has the heart. He has the stand-up, but the submission skills aren't there. And I do think that Justin Gaethje getting a little reckless. And if the fight does go to the ground, I can see him just wanting to look for a ground and pound. And I can just see Charles Oliveira just waiting for the perfect opportunity to sink an armbar, triangle, or a rear naked choke. I do think that he's gonna just wait on it and want Justin Gaethje to get messy and push him. Like I think Charles Oliveira definitely knows this is going to be a tough fight. He knows that Justin Gaethje wants to make this a fight of the night, and he knows Justin Gaethje wants to put him out. I think everyone knows here that Justin Gaethje doesn't want to make it to the final 5 rounds. I think everyone knows that he wants to end it early, and I think Charles Oliveira is going to be banking on that and try to catch him slipping, pretty much like how Khabib did.
Yeah, Jose, honestly, those are some great points, man. And you kind of just reminded me of one of the, bigger concerns I have if I'm on Gaethje's side of things, because, looking at Charles Oliveira's reach is 74 inches, man. That's insane for a guy that's 5 feet 10 inches tall. Gaethje is at 70 inches, so that 4 inch reach advantage could prove to be, relatively devastating on the ground if Gaethje isn't able to close that distance and get in close. It is worth mentioning that this is a big octagon that they're fighting in. This isn't just a small little fight night octagons. There's going to be a lot of space to move around in this octagon, and I think that might play towards Oliveira's side if this does stay on the feet. If Oliveira has the endurance and ability to move around and stay kind of hopping around on his feet and keep distance from Gaethje. Obviously, you mentioned Gaethje's kicking ability could come into play here, but in the end, that's what would probably be Oliveira's best path to winning this fight if he can't get the takedowns. But in the end, I can't say I'm convinced enough. I'm looking at Charles Oliveira's last fight against Poirier. He was unable to get a single takedown on Poirier on 6 attempts, and the only reason that fight went to the ground was when Poirier got a knockdown on Charles Oliveira, and Joseph Poirier took it to the ground himself. Oliveira got the reversal and tried 3 sub attempts before ending that fight. So I'm questioning whether or not Oliveira is going to go out there and stick and commit to that ground game as much as everybody thinks he should. I think he might kind of pull, in essence, a similar thing to Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat, when it seemed like he might keep trying to bring it to the ground and control Khamzat on the ground. He said, screw this, I'm going to duke it out with this guy, and we're just going to have a good fight. And I almost kind of see that playing out in this fight here. And in that case, I just got to take Justin Gaethje in that situation.
That's a great point you have there, Nick. And yes, I do think Justin Gaethje is going to bring Charles Oliveira down to this world, but I do think Charles Oliveira is going to try to stay composed and avoid that because I do think a lot of fighters probably know that maybe that's, you don't want to fall into Justin's world. You want to stay out of it. I think Dustin Poirier is one of the better fights that set up the blueprint for everyone else in terms of like, hey, stay calm, stay collective, and don't get too messy. Yes, Justin Gaethje will blitz you at times, and you have no choice but to get sloppy. But like Dustin Poirier, as long as you can stay composed and get yourself out of those scenarios and just stick to the game plan, you can coast to victory. And I think that's what Charles Oliveira is gonna stick with personally. So that being said, yeah, if I were to choose a fighter down, yeah, I'm definitely putting my money down on Charles Oliveira for this. I think he's destined. I think he's on a mission to become the new GOAT, and it's such a shame because I would definitely love to see a Charles Oliveira and Khabib Nurmagomedov matchup someday.
Yeah, honestly, I totally agree with that last statement about it's sad to see either of these guys losing at this point. I love both of their stories, and they both have some of the biggest hearts in the UFC. They will not give up, and that's why I'm so excited to see the fight because no matter how it ends up, I just know either way, one of these guys is going to go to hell and come back to get this win. I love Justin Gaethje's quote in his interview earlier this week when they asked him about that, and he said, "Yup, Charles Oliveira knows he's going to have to walk through hell and back to beat me." And stuff like that is just really exciting for me to hear as a fight fan because you just know chaos is going to ensue. But that being said, it looks like we're going to differ a little bit on this main card. I'm going to be going with Justin Gaethje here. I think you can get some really good value at plus 152 with him. And no matter what, even if he doesn't get the win here, he's going to give you your money's worth. This guy is going to give all. And honestly, if this goes to the championship rounds 4 and 5, I think that would honestly benefit Gaethje. I think this kid is going to just keep putting it on. I've been seeing him running miles and miles in the dry desert heat of Colorado. This is going to be nothing going into the ring for 25 minutes and taking down one of the best to do it in the lightweight division. Give me Justin Gaethje. That leads us to my favorite part of the segment, Jose. We're going to be talking and finishing up here with some best bets. UFC 274. We've discussed all the main fights from this card, and I just want to finish off with some of my bets that I think are hits. All of these are going to be locks this week. So go ahead and follow us at Moneyline MMA on Twitter, at Moneyline MMA on YouTube. These picks are going to be continuing every week, and we're going to continue to tally our win loss. At this point, we're 3-1, and we're going to continue hitting home runs here. My first pick of this card is going to be Chandler by decision/points. This is a 3 round fight here against Tony Ferguson, and I think we both know, as explained previously, that Tony Ferguson's chin is not giving in. And at this point, it'd be silly to think that you can submit Tony Ferguson, given the angle his elbow went with Oliveira. That being said, this fight is going to go the distance because I've got Chandler winning, and Chandler's going to take at least 2 of these rounds to win against Tony Ferguson. You can get that at plus 260 on FanDuel. We're looking at Gaethje money line as the second pick here. This one I know Jose isn't going to agree with, excuse me, but to me that is a sane value for one of the best fighters in the UFC. I understand he's fighting another one of the best UFC fighters, but at this point I would gladly take Gaethje plus 154 on the sports books. And my third lock of the week is a fight that we didn't get to discuss because it was unfortunately not on the main event card, but it is headlining the preliminary events. That is Chaos Williams versus Randy Brown. This is going to be a crazy fight that I don't think any UFC or fight fan in general would want to miss because Chaos Williams does bring chaos, just as his name states, and I can't wait to see him knock out Randy Brown in this fight. Randy Brown is one of the more technical strikers. I would not be surprised to see this go to the third round, and it might be close until then. But just you wait and see. Chaos Williams is going to get a clip on Randy Brown, and he will get that KO. If you're able to find that bet, feel free to take it. Otherwise, just take Chaos minus 114 money line because I think he's going to win that fight straight up. Um, those are my 3 locks of the week. Which being said, I'm going to go to my underdog of the week, which is obviously Justin Gaethje. How could we even pass up on an underdog like this? Clearly, my underdog of the week, my lock of the week is Michael Chandler. This guy is fighting one of the best and beloved UFC fighters, Tony Ferguson. But in all honesty, Chandler's going to get it done here. And whether we like it or not, it's kind of getting into the next generation. So we got to accept that and take Chandler as a lock here. But the last section here of our betting preview is going to be with parlays. We here at Money Lion MMA, we like to give out a couple different parlay options because some of us are a little bit more risk taking, and some of us want to just bet a couple dollars and hopefully get this money back. Don't want to have to be too worried about getting ridiculous returns. So I'm going to start out with a 3 leg parlay that's got the highest odds of hitting here, and you're still going to get pretty good money in return. So you're going to want to add Michael Chandler. You're going to want to add Rose Namajunas, and you're going to want to put OSP in a 3 leg parlay, and you can find that at plus 153. Now, believe me, you're going to get your money back on that bet. These three are the most locks fights of the night, and obviously it kind of shows in that plus 153 line for a 3 leg parlay. That isn't as high as I might expect it to be, but the tax is for a good reason because these fighters are going to win. The medium, a little bit more risky parlay level here. We're going to stick with the Chandler Rose and OSP. We're going to add in the underdog, Justin Gaethje here. Just by adding in Justin Gaethje, you can get yourself a plus 539 4 leg parlay, and obviously, it's a little bit more risky because that involves betting against the current lightweight champion. But in my opinion, that's an extremely high value bet. I'm not asking to put a whole bunch of money down on that. You could win plus 539. So the money speaks for itself on that one. But if you really want to get risky, you can go Chandler, Rose, OSP, and Gaethje. And on top of that, let's add on my boy Chaos Williams. And with those 5 legs of this parlay, you could get plus 1100 odds on your return. That is one of the highest return parlays I've given out with some of the highest confidence in that hitting. So I would highly suggest going out and at least putting a couple dollars with a parlay with those 5 guys on it. And that being said, those are the bets endorsed by Moneyline MMA for UFC 274. Please leave a comment and let us know what you guys are going to be betting on here and what you guys think about this main event, since Jose and I clearly disagree. Take it easy.